Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to On the Mic with Mike. We are the premier business radio program. I'm your host, Mike King. I appreciate you being here with me. So this is part of the Mike King Biz Radio Network, which is ESPN Richmond 106.1, The Choice 105.3, as well as International Business Coach Radio. And we're coming to you from the ESPN studios. 1 second. On the Mic with Mike back better than ever. So we're here coming to you from the studios at ESPN. All righty. So there's a man who's here with me right now. I met him over at Henrico through Henrico Economic Development. I've been seeing him around. It is a brand. When I see it says get a leg up, become an agent with square feet. John J. Schwartz is here. Welcome to the program, sir.
Mike, how are you? Good to be here.
I'm doing good. All right. So we got to touch on a number of things, a couple of things. One, we're going to talk about the square feet. Let's tell that story. And then we got some sports stuff as well to get into. Because you are like a Renaissance man. You've done a thing or two.
I think that's a compliment.
That is a compliment. From a guy who does some things, you have done some things.
Well, a square feet thing, I had an ankle fusion from having been a USTA rated tennis player for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it was. So I couldn't play tennis anymore. And Doug Burford's a very good friend. And he runs probably the most creative and best ad agency in town. I'll give him a commercial.
Perfect.
And he called me one day. So let's have lunch to see how you're doing, how you feel. I said, okay. And then about a week later, he calls me. He says, I got an idea for you. I'm going to make you the man with square feet. Make a long story short, he did. We came up with the commercial. We came up with the plan. He says, look, you've been on the air enough. We're going to use your voice. You'll be the voice of it. I said, well, that's okay. That fits. So we did the commercials. I knew exactly where I wanted to run them. I committed them to drive time, 6 a.m. to 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the mornings. Mostly in the winter, from January 1 to the final 4, because that's when schools open, close, the weather, the roads, traffic, all that kind of stuff. That was important. So we aired on a certain, station in town. And the first week I ran that ad, somebody called and said, I have 18,750 square foot warehouse where my business occupied. I've got some vacant space. Can you rent it for me? And the key to his phone call was he asked for the man with square feet, which means he heard the commercial, because the message is deal with the man with square feet for your real estate needs, commercial real estate needs. And that told me that the ad worked. And the rest is history. We've changed the ad 4 or 5 times. We now have a TV commercial. And I'm just blessed that Doug and his team have done a great job.
How long ago was that?
That would be about 8 years ago.
8 years ago. I come in
9 years ago.
And I hear that and see that. And it took a minute for me to get what it was. But I remember when I understood, you understand what time it was. So when the person asked for the man with the square feet, you knew that the marketing aspect, what the Burford agency had come up with, was working.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And it's worked ever since. We've changed obviously time goes, you got to change the ad. And we've done that. I forgot how many times. And he had actually done the whiteboard when we first met for the TV commercial. And I wasn't ready for that for a host of reasons. I said, let's see if this works first. And it worked well. And then we did the TV commercial about 3 years ago. And I have to tell you, last night I attended a function, a charity function for Jewish federations of Richmond in America. 50 people stopped. I saw a TV ad yesterday. That's a great TV ad. I'm like, okay, people are watching it. But we have it on all kinds of networks. And so it told me that it's still working. So we keep going.
So the last one.
Plus, it's all on a VCU network.
It's running now. Where was that shot at? On Broad Street?
All over town. We had 5 settings. One was crossing the bridge downtown 9th Street.
I remember that one.
One was in Goochland, out where Satellites is. One was in Innsbruck. One was somewhere else. 5 or 6 locations.
Where you sit on the bench.
Oh yeah, down. Well, that was in past Short Pump, one of the shopping centers in Short Pump, and then the other one was down in the bottom, in Chaco Bottom. I mean, somewhere down in Chaco Bottom towards the river.
So for a person starting out in business, so it's Mike King, John J. Schwartz is here, the man with the square feet. Talk about branding and setting yourself up, because there's a bunch of people out there who does something. There's somebody who does something that you do. How do you set yourself apart?
Well, a couple things. You got to learn the business a little bit. So you're best off learning from somebody who's been at it a while. I didn't necessarily do it just because of some other family factors, but I've always recommended that you go to the biggest firm you possibly can be hired for in the business you want to be in, and let them help them pay for your mistakes. You know,
That is true.
you know, that's kind of the
Let-
message I'd give them. And
let-
whether they do
let
it or
them
not,
pay
it's
for
another
your
story.
mistakes.
Yeah, and then try to narrow. When I came around, you didn't narrow your business to one type: retail, industrial, office. It was sort of like, here's your desk, here's your phone. Good luck, sucker. You're on your own. That was sort of the mindset in those days. And you just did what business brought you. And fortunately, I had some people, family, and others who just gave me business, and I would co-op with other brokers because I needed to learn. And so luckily, most of the brokers in those days, and more so today, are more than willing to give you assistance and help you and team up with you, and you share the fee. You know.
So you had more business than knowledge back then.
Well, I had
when you
been in,
first
I have
started.
a BS degree in accounting, was my undergraduate degree. So I had a good sense for financing, for financials. So I understood the dynamics of dollars and cents, you know, whether it was a lease, whether it was a sale. That part was easy for me from an academic perspective. My family had been in the grocery business. My family had been in the clothing business. So, you know, I had worked in those settings growing up in college, high school, the whole bit, and, you know, post-military before I settled into real estate. So I had a grip of those types of things, from both the C-level suite making business decisions to the managers on the street or at the store level making decisions to you know, all the customers and stuff. So I had a good feel for that part of it, even though that was primarily retail and logistics. At that point, I hadn't even done any office space. That came later. And then I was very fortunate that I hooked up with a guy that owned a decent sized firm here. He was trying to expand his commercial division. My good friend Charlie Blankenship, may he rest in peace, and James River Realtors, and he brought me over there to team up with another guy to do be their commercial brokers, and that meant a lot to me, and that really helped me a lot because I had a team of people. It finally had staff to support all the things I was doing as a marketing person and as a rainmaker.
When you are doing things now, when you look back, how's real estate changed on the commercial side now?
Well, there are more players. It's more about money today than ever before. The cosmopolitan nature of the people involved. People ask me that question about what's the number one thing about your industry that's changed. I said the quality of the people and the fact that the demographics are so different. You know, when I started, I don't think there were two women in real estate in Richmond, commercial real estate, and one was the daughter of a guy that owned a big firm here. And she was very good, but now.
But they were on the residential side.
No. They
weren't,
there were a lot of women on the residential side in
were-
those
they
days,
were
but
a lot.
I didn't do any residential, so that I didn't, you know, other than knowing them, I didn't have any feel for that. Other than we would sell dirt and builders would build houses and they would sell them, but we would sell the dirt to builders or developers and they would create the residential project. But the biggest change is the demographics of demographics of the talent. And since I work all over the country, I've done deals in 41 states and lost track of how many cities. That's been the biggest factor in change that I've seen in the quality of the people. They all come with either very strong degrees or work experience that got them into real estate one way or the other. Many of them started at low-level positions in companies and found the real estate department to be something they wanted to be a part of, and they learned from an experienced, you know, VP of real estate or director of real estate or manager of real estate, and they knew the business of the company, and then real estate became a factor and a function that they needed to follow. So that's that, and just the marketplace today, CoStar being nothing you can't do and get an answer for between CoStar, LoopNet, Crexi, and those kinds of services. So there's very little that you don't need. A lot of people don't subscribe to those, but I couldn't live without them. This morning, I have a client looking for a particular warehouse for his business. He's grown, he's trying to expand it. We're looking for a bigger warehouse and office space. And while I'm talking to him on the phone, I'm sending my CoStar person a message of what I need. And within 30 seconds, minute and a half, I got a whole list of things. I sent it to my client. This whole thing took 10 minutes. And we kept doing, we said the leasing, what's available for lease, what's available for sale. Here's the demography. Here's the spacing area we want between these four quadrants. Did it all in 10 minutes. That's the technology is the number one thing.
What would that have been 25, 30 years ago?
Well, all you could have done in those days was go to the locality go to their assessor's records, sit down with these massive books and just turn pages until you found sites that found areas that fit. You didn't necessarily find properties available, but you found areas that fit. The old MLS book, for instance, that would come out every Friday, I'm telling you, it was 6 inches thick if you did residential. And the commercial part of it wasn't even in there. It was a crapshoot. And you had to hope there were brokers who just didn't want to tell you anything. And you had to go dig and dig and dig. But if you go to the localities and then you talk to the assessor and you say, can I have the information on this, and this property? And you get it. And so it was really different and difficult. And the people today don't have any understanding of that.
They don't.
Because you could sit in your closet, with technology working for you and get all the information you ever need.
Times have changed.
Oh, yeah.
On the Mike King here. This is part of the Mike King Biz Radio Network. We talk to best and the brightest who are out there. So not only does this man know real estate, commercial real estate in and out. Sir, you got a history with sports, of VCU basketball. So you're rocking your VCU gear. You say you were an alum first, so we're gonna get that out of the way. Tell people your connection with VCU basketball and the university.
Well, I have a BS degree in accounting from VCU, and we're very involved in more departments of VCU than probably most people. From the School of Business, which is their first and foremost, because that's where I went to school, to the School of the Arts, to a whole lot of functions. We just had a wonderful art tour at one of the new hospital buildings. So we've gotten involved with Massey and with Parley Heart Provision. I'm going to leave somebody out. The Children's Hospital. Very involved with School of the Arts, many levels: fashion, music, design, sculpture. You pick it. We're involved in that. I apologize if I've forgotten anybody in this list, but VCU basketball was first and foremost outside of my academic role. I came back to Richmond in the early 70s after my military life and graduation before I went to graduate school. And I walked in the athletic director's office and I said, "What can I do for you?" He didn't know who I was. He said, "Who the heck are you?" And I said, "Well, Dr. Brandt, the first president of the university, called me the first Ram." And that's because I was a student government vice president when he first got appointed president. And I was probably one of the first students he ever met. And I was talkative even in those days. He said, "You must be the first Ram." So Dr. Brandt gave me that name. So I'm looking at Chuck now and he says, "Okay, I don't have a radio network and I don't have a coach's show." The first two things he said to me, I said, "Okay, let me see if I can help you." He's laughing like, "Yeah, this guy's going to help me."
So my father always was saying, it's not who you know, it's who knows you, and connecting people. Did you come from a family of folks who know people?
Yes and no. My parents were not in that world. They were, retail people, worked in retail all their life. My uncle was sort of in that business because he owned a grocery business, and he knew people. He needed to know people, and he had a good store located downtown Richmond where there was all the action with all the department stores and all the vendors, and a lot of friends who had small family businesses down there from every type imaginable back in the 70s or long before that. They opened that store, I think, in the 60s. I don't know. I wouldn't have known when they opened it, but they were certainly there when I was coming around in the later years of my youth. So they did. I really didn't. I just had that.
But you were around the family
personality.
Business, and around the family business, people come with it.
Yeah. They were very inspirational and helpful because they both were well-known businesses. One was Sigel Supermarkets, which was the urban supermarket chain in those days, and later on became the S&K brand for clothes. Famous Brands, which my uncle started, my cousin ran until he sold it or closed it.
Was it S&K and Short Pump?
They're everywhere. They had 200 some stores around the country. The headquarters was in Short Pump.
Is that what it was?
That's where the headquarters ultimately was.
Oh, okay.
They built a office warehouse out there, which they eventually sold.
So S&K was your family?
It was my cousin ran it. My uncle started it with his son and son-in-law, and then my cousin ran it until it shut down or closed or sold.
So you were the first Ram. That was your moniker.
That was
okay.
The first one.
So what happens when he says we don't have a coach's show or a pregame? What do you do?
Well, Bailey Wiggins was a friend of mine that I went to school with, and he was in advertising. And at the time, he was a marketing person or something at Channel 12. And I called him and I said, can you do this? And he says to me, we've got a 30-minute gap that we need to fill in with something local. Why don't what about us doing the Chuck No Show? I said, he'd be the happiest guy in the world, especially if it didn't cost the university anything. He says, no, it won't cost you anything. We'll do it. So that solved that problem. And I went around town talking to radio stations. I never knew how to do that other than.
But you were a talker.
Calling general managers. I was a salesman. I became a salesman very early. So, I'm calling around and most radio station general managers were polite, those who would talk to me. And the rest of them were like, you got to be PC bad. What are you talking about? So I stumbled onto Gordon Hood, God bless him, who was the general manager of WDYL in Chester, Virginia. It was a gospel station.
That's where I got my start at in Chester.
He was a gospel.
The station on the corner at Harrogate.
I don't remember. It was I'm not even sure I ever went there. It was a gospel station. And he thought that gospel religion and VCU basketball was a good match.
Okay.
We were on the air. So I went back and told Chuck, and he looked at me like, what? You got me a coach's show? You got me a broadcast? He said, what are we going to do next? Who's going to broadcast this thing? I said, well, I can certainly do the broadcast. And that when the light bulb went off, and I remembered somehow Bob Gilmore, I knew Frank Soden. He was a neighbor. I grew up with him and his children. Frank was a voice at University of Richmond. He ran WRNL in those days. So I went over to his house and said to him, what do I do? He said, well, Gilmore, my co-broadcast baseball person, he doesn't have anything to do in the wintertime, basically. I mean, he's not doing games in the wintertime. He works for us. He said, why don't you see if Bob will do it? And certainly he had experience doing it. He was a professional. So that was the first play-by-play guy, and I was the first color man. So we were on the air. And of course, Chuck's yelling, how are we going to pay for this? I called a couple of my friends and, family businesses, different people. We put up some money, but we still didn't have enough money. So I said, I'll take care of this. I'm going to go see the president. Of course, every department head at VCU, even today, is nervous when you say, I'm going to go see the president. But I had access,
He knew who you were.
He knew me, and he knew me. He gave me the title of the first Ram. So I walked over to his office, knocked on his door, and his gatekeeper, who I happen to know, she said, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. And I went in there and told him what I wanted to do. He said, just watch the cost and I'll cover it. That's the long and short of the story. There's a little more to it than that. But so we did, and we were on the air. That started it.
You still do a lot with the university to this day, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Talk about why that's so important to you.
It's me. It's who I am. I'm the first Ultimate Ram. They had a contest in 2011.
The first Ultimate Ram.
They had a contest. Well, I was the first voice. I was first Ram from Dr. Brown. I was the first voice of VCU basketball. I think Robbie gave me that title. And then in 2011, I think the marketing department had a contest for who was the first Ultimate Ram. They had the president of student body. He had a very, very visible, high quality, wonderful guy, professor that everybody loved and knew. And I was nominated by the Alumni Association. And it was a Facebook contest. Well, I wasn't on Facebook. I didn't know how to do that, but my kids did. Anyway, I won that, and I didn't think much of it. But ever since then, there's not one day that goes by where somebody doesn't call me the first Ultimate Ram at the university. So now I have that title, and everything I get from them is first John J. Schwartz and my wife, and first Ultimate Ram, and it's carried now for what's going on 11 years, I guess. But we've gotten very involved, like as I said, in so many things every day. Like tonight, we're going to a special function called Retail, the Shift Lab, something sponsored by I don't know if it's the School of the Arts or the advertising, somebody, I forgot who's sponsoring it, but it's a neat thing. And then also the first novelist, which is sponsored by the Cabell Library, that we're very involved in. That's tonight as well. It's a program they started decades ago where they would have people write their first book, their first novel. They'd submit it to a committee review. They'd get hundreds of applications. I never got involved in reading the books and reviewing them until they selected the winner. I don't have that kind of patience.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. John J. Schwartz, the man with square feet. Not just that, the man has history. A shout out to, when the first time I went to one of the VCU basketball games, I'm like, the energy in there was, now I'm from Philadelphia. And so we had the Palestra, that we had the Big Five.
Had a Big Five.
We had the Big Five. Big Five was good, the Palestra, but it wasn't the energy in like when I saw at VCU basketball.
Well, we never had a home. We were we started at the Franklin Street Gym, which barely set 2,000 if you were lucky. If the fire marshal looked the other way, you'd have 2,000 people in there. And then we started going to the Coliseum, and then we had all our games at the Coliseum. And that just wasn't the best fit. But at the time, it was the only fit. And it worked for us. But we never, I don't know that in all the years we played there, and in those days I was on the air a lot, and I was there all the time. I don't know that we ever sold it out. I can't remember. Maybe an Old Dominion game, maybe when we first played the University of Richmond. I don't think we sold it out. Anyway, Sickle Center got built 22 years ago, and I may be wrong on that. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. And now we had a home. We were on campus. So we started about 18 years ago building more student housing. And the commitment was that even if you were a freshman and you lived in the city of Richmond, you had to live on campus your first year. So we now have gotten up to, and please somebody correct me, I think we're up to 10,000 beds on campus.
So now, really?
Yeah. So now you have kids on campus who need to go do something. And so, besides all the other things that have happened in the vast growth of VCU, with all the other areas of the university and departments and physical structures, we increased, I understood the other night, 1,200 student tickets to the game. And student tickets are always the thing with a waiting list of people standing outside to when the building's not sold out and their game starts, they let the rest of them in to fill up the seats. So we'll get 1,000, 2,000 students a night. And then obviously success with the program draws season ticket holders and advertisers, and how that goes. So that's packed the house. And then the other factor is being a very good basketball team is the key. But things like the Peppers,
the band is on point.
Well, you got to realize we have a massive, fabulous music department. And if you studied the music department at VCU under the School of the Arts, you would find fabulous musicians at every level, at every type, from writing to producing to performing. And they're all over the world performing. And when I travel, I'll usually ask the chair of the music department, I'm going to be in such and such a city, we got anybody performing here? And he'll know. He'll know exactly who's performing, and I'll generally try to go if I can. Particularly when we used to go to New Orleans a lot, with a major client in the city of New Orleans, and we have 2 or 3 people with huge contacts in the Bayou, so they would always send me to a jazz place or something. Anyhow, so that most, if not all, the musicians in the Peppers are not just people who just play the guitars or the horn. They're music major types who learn how to do it at the highest level. So you're getting people who really understand what they're doing, and many of them go on to other things in the music arena. Some go work in the secondary school system as music directors. Many of them perform out of there and to get another major and go to work or something. But that group has come together and has always been the #1 college band. Everywhere we go, if they have a contest, we usually always win or second. When the CAA used to come here for their tournament, the games were great, but the best event ever was across the street in the convention center. You'd get the Green Machine, Doc Nix from George Mason, fabulous guy, head of the music department. He kind of wrote the book on college music bands, prep bands. You'd get the George Mason Green Machine, you'd get the Peppers, and occasionally you get the Old Dominion band. And they'd have a concert. They'd not necessarily competition.
But it's a competition.
But the 3 of them would set up in this massive hall at the convention center. And that was usually pregame the 12 o'clock game on a Saturday. And I'm telling you what, you had to beg to get a ticket to that. You had to beg to get into that building to see that, because they were fabulous. We missed that a lot. And although when we go to now the Barclays Center, we've tried to find a place to where we can get George Mason VCU together to do it again. Because now that Ryan's back, the head of Peppers, Ryan.
He had left a while, didn't he?
He left for about 3 years or 4 years or something. And he and Doc Nix are good friends, as he is with many of us, because we just got to know him over the years. And we've been trying to figure out, we don't necessarily stay at the same hotel. It's tough because you're at different hotels in the building. It's hard to find a place to do that again. But I've been talking to my friends in New York in the real estate business to see if there's something to the Barclays that we can. It's just expensive to rent it. Then you got to charge for it. It becomes a real business model.
There you go, John J. Schwartz, the man with square feet. Not just that, he got a story. He definitely has a story. You got, from a guy who has some stories, you got some stories. So it has been my pleasure.
Age and
honor.
experience and treachery
Well,
use your
there's-
speed
I
every
like
day.
the last one, the treachery, yes, because that's where you put the, the cap on things. I'd like to thank you for coming in.
My
How can
pleasure.
people find you out there?
Well, you can go to my website, themanwithsquarefeet.com, for my commercial real estate business. And the number is 804-350-1866. But the website is themanwithsquarefeet.com.
There you go. We'd like to thank you for coming on the Mike. We are the best business radio program around. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks now.